Welcome to the Holy Post. On today's show, Russell Moore says that evangelicals are no longer the largest religious group in the South. Instead, they've been replaced by a dangerous new form of secularism. But interestingly, these people still think of themselves as Christians. Then, a church in Texas is facing legal trouble for performing an evangelistic version of the musical Hamilton without a license. Then I talked to Katelyn Beaty about her new book, Celebrities for Jesus, How Personas, Platforms, and Profits Are Hurting the Church. All that, plus Phil eulogizes Freya the walrus, and a man sues after 5 years of flagellance. Here is episode 522.
Hey there, welcome back to the Holy Post podcast. I'm Phil Vischer. I'm here with Sky Jitani. Hi, Sky.
Hello, Phil.
Good to see you.
You too.
Thank you. And back from who knows where and beaming in from who knows where, we have Christian Taylor. Hey, Christian.
Hey, Phil and Sky. Nice to see you guys.
Good to see you. Where are you?
Where are you?
Well, today I am in Pensacola, Florida. Last week I was in Gulf Shores, no, I wasn't. I was in Orange Beach, Alabama, which if you've never been there, Orange Beach is the bomb.
Is it? It's the bomb?
Mm-hmm. Bomb
Okay.
diggity.
Okay.
Are you running from the law?
Yeah. Are you touring with your new band? What the heck?
You know what? Actually, I'm 55, and my most favorite place in the world is the beach. And I was analyzing that today, and I realized I was born in Gulfport, Mississippi, and I'm sure my whole first year of life, my mom took me to the beach, and they did in my middle school years. So that makes sense.
Okay.
But since I've been grown up, I really haven't gone to the beach very much, since I think I'm in a midlife crisis where I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go to the beach as many times as I can. And so this year I've been to the beach in Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, and Normandy. So I think I've accomplished that. And today I even saw dolphins.
Oh, that's
playing
great.
off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida. So I'm glad I made the choice.
Well, all I can say is that's just beachy. And now the theme song. What's the news that you like the most? Who's your favorite podcast host? If it's breakfast, get your toast. It's Sky and Phil and the Holy Post. Sky and Phil and the Holy Post. And sometimes Christian. Sky, you look like you had something to say.
No, I was just thinking her comment about dolphins is a nice transition to our story about your
I'm
friend.
sad. Oh, everyone sent me the story. Christian doesn't even know.
I don't even know.
Because she doesn't listen to the podcast. Freya the walrus.
Now, I take that back. I do listen to podcasts. Stop saying that. I do listen to the podcast. I don't listen to every single episode.
Yeah. Okay. The walrus that was visiting French or Dutch ports and resting on little Dutch boats and sinking them with her enormous...
Norway. It was Norway.
It was Norway?
Yeah.
Oh, hold on a second. I had no idea we were still recording.
Yeah.
I thought we were talking personally.
No, that's okay. Was it Norway?
It was Norway. There's no walruses in Holland. There's
no what?
Well, it is The Hague.
There's no walruses.
The Hague is right there on the water.
Yeah, Holland has a lot of water, but they don't have walruses.
Googling it.
They're an Arctic species.
Norway euthanizes beloved 1,300-pound walrus named Freya. Norway did the deed.
Okay.
Norway, not the Dutch. My mistake.
Now, why is this news?
Because we talked about her a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and she was inspiring me. Freya's famous, and she was inspiring me, and I kind of felt a little bit like Freya on the inside. But
why was she famous? You guys got to fill me in. Sorry.
Why? Because she was a social media sensation by sinking all these little boats in Norwegian ports.
Okay.
And everybody loved her, but they were getting too close to her. So the Norwegian authorities declared her a public safety risk nuisance. and they
Okay.
euthanize.
And so that's why
Phil-
you feel like people are going to euthanize you or
I
something,
don't
Phil?
remember why I was comparing myself to Freya.
Here's
I'm just
why.
looking for a place to lie down in the sun and be by myself, and everyone's making a big deal out of it. And now
Phil,
I'll
you
be
are
euthanized.
so selective in your reporting. This is the problem. You are like one of those cable news networks that only reports the side of the story
What?
that conforms to the narrative you want.
What?
Because when you actually read the story, you make it sound like Freya is this hapless, orphaned
Yes.
walrus without a
Yes.
family who's just
Yes.
climbing onto pleasure craft, wanting to sun herself, but doesn't
Yes.
realize how big she is and sinks these boats. And it's so sad. And
Exactly.
no.
What?
Because when you actually read the story, you find out that, like, for example, this is a quote. On one occasion, police had to evacuate and seal off a bathing area after Freya chased a woman into the sea. And like she's
who
been
hasn't
chasing,
chased a woman into the sea before? Come on.
she has been going after people.
That
She's not just
describes
sinking boats.
that describes most of my youth group trips to the Michigan dunes.
I love how Sky keeps us all honest.
I'm trying.
Okay. So, in honor of Freya, I wrote a little song
Hooray!
to commemorate Freya's life and untimely death with this little song.
Oh,
Okay.
this makes me so happy.
Thank you. It's too high for me, though. Everybody there, we gotta say a prayer for Freya. Where is she? Is she in walrus heaven? Or is that not a place you can be? Everybody there, we gotta say a prayer for Freya. Terribly sat on one too many Norwegian boats, and 13 pounds is hard to float. Maybe if she'd been the size of a goat, the Dutch would have let her. Oh, sorry. The Norwegians would have let her be. There, that's my Freya song. In honor of Freya.
Oh, thank
Freya,
you,
rest
Phil.
in peace. Sky, when you were in seminary, did they talk about a heaven for walrus?
No.
Sky.
End of story. Yeah, she's done. She's gone. I'm an annihilationist when it comes to walruses.
Oh, that's so sad.
There's one quote in the article that I thought was kind of funny. So somebody was trying to justify why they had to do this and said, this is a zoologist, Per Epson Field, I think is the way you say his name.
Yeah.
You cannot expect 1.6 million people not to swim in Oslo Fjord, he said. People were out swimming and suddenly there it was, a meter away. If you get hit by even a little bit of 600 kilograms of muscle and blubber, everyone knows what happens.
You bounce off. You bounce off like a balloon.
He says
Boing,
everyone knows
boing,
what
boing,
happens.
boing,
Like it
boing.
occurs all the time in Norway. Yeah, but
Not
she wasn't.
happy about that. A whole bunch of people tweeted it to me. Oh, Phil, did you hear? Oh, Phil, I'm so sorry. They knew.
Did you feel like that was a message to you?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
clearly people are associating me with Freya.
They knew that I had a deep emotional connection with Freya the walrus. So the news of her untimely demise at the hands of the man that came down on her, it's very, very sad. Okay.
Well, I think this sounds like a beautiful children's book. Your next children's book, you can talk about how this walrus must have felt on the inside, and you could put a little DVD in there, of course, a CD in there, which nobody listens to, that with your little song.
I'm not sure if great children's books end with euthanasia in general, but maybe in Norway.
I think it should be like a B horror movie where Freya is like this bloodthirsty walrus and she gets blown up like Jaws at the end of the movie.
Yeah. And like a Japanese, like a giant walrus attacking Tokyo. That would
except
work.
it's a giant walrus attacking Oslo.
Yeah, that could work. Sure.
Of course.
Oslo the Lucky Walrus.
If you make it anime, it'll take off.
That was a reference to Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, Walt's first hit character. Oh, that was such an inside joke for Disney buffs. Okay, and now it's time for News of the Butt.
Oh, no.
And now it's time for news of the butt. Let me just give you the headline. Father who hasn't stopped farting since he ate a ham roll at a market 5 years ago sues for £200,000.
Oh, my word.
Did you hear that, Sky?
A little bit. What did he eat?
A ham roll. He ate a ham roll. A father who hasn't stopped farting since eating a ham roll 5 years ago is suing the stall which sold it to him for £200,000. Tyrone Pardes, 46, age 46, bought the offending food item at a Christmas market in Birmingham. This is from UK. That he visited with his wife and children. The father, after eating the ham roll, was hit by stomach cramps, fever, vomiting, and diarrhea within hours of eating in December 2017 and was bedridden for 5 weeks. 5 weeks of bed riding. That's what ridden means. Like a horse has been ridden. So it's bed riding if you do it in the present. But the bout of what is said to have been salmonella did not end there, with Mr. Pardes being afflicted with regular and uncontrollable flatulence that wakes him at night and embarrasses him in public ever since. So he's suing the seller of the ham roll for £200,000.
If this is successful, I am going to follow suit because I keep farting all the time also. Certainly something in my past, some random broccoli or something like that.
You just made Sky sit back visibly from the microphone.
Okay, then.
We all do it. Come on. If we're honest
what?
with
I've never passed gas in my life.
Yeah,
Oh
but
my
okay,
word.
there's a difference between like the normal passage of gas that happens with all mammals, I'm assuming, and like constantly farting, which is what it sounded like you just confessed to, Christian.
Well, no, I mean, there's farting all day long. Not all day long, but I mean,
it's not that it's constant. It's just that it's all day long.
I have to rein it in, don't you?
Oh,
if you're going to be...
It depends.
Sky,
think about this.
Humor
if you
her.
didn't rein it in, think about how much that activity would consume.
Humor her, Sky.
Okay.
Yes, that is exactly the same for me. I couldn't agree more.
That's the only reason I go to the gym, just to strengthen my butt muscles so that I have self-control.
So the offending stall that sold at the Christmas market that sold the ham roll was in fact closed down and found to have to be dirty. But they didn't find any salmonella. They found E. coli. So their defense is, the doctors say you had salmonella. We had no evidence of salmonella, so it's not us. So you have to prove that we had salmonella in our stall on our ham rolls, or we don't owe you anything.
So, but could E. coli also cause the symptoms and flatulence that this man is
What do I
experiencing?
look like, a doctor?
I
don't know.
Is their defense legitimate is my point. Like, can they...
I don't know. It may be legit. Well, I'll follow this story. Like the Freya the walrus story, we'll give continual updates, and when we know how the case goes, I'll write a song about it. Okay, Sky?
I do have to tell you, though, that sounds horrible. Like, I do feel really, really bad for this man. I mean, that's a terrible... 5 years?
Yeah,
After
5 years of flatulence.
Why is he waiting 5 years in order to file suit? I mean,
he finally got sick of it. That's it. That's enough. 4 years was fine. 5 years is too much. It sounds like a curse that a witch would put on someone. I curse you with 5 years of flatulence. Oh no!
I'll tell you what, though. I once had some Chinese food from a stall in Union Station in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, that's not a good way to start a story.
It's not. I went back to my hotel room, and that night I got really, really sick that night, and I honestly thought someone was going to find me dead on the floor of the bathroom of my hotel room, like some kind of DC hooker. And it was bad. Like I had to cancel a meeting with a congressman the next day. I was supposed to fly out, and I mean, the room was spinning. I think I was hallucinating. I have never been that sick that quickly.
But did it give you 5 years of flatulence?
Well, not constant, but it wasn't good. I don't know how I made it home. I really don't, but it was a miracle. And
okay.
So food poisoning is
horrific.
It's really, really bad. But to think that this guy, I just don't understand though. Like, I understand he had a terrible experience and was hospitalized and went through all that, but couldn't that actually result in 5 years of chronic flagellance?
Well, I don't know that. I imagine there might be a doctor called as an expert witness to say if
Probably.
that's even possible. Can one ham roll produce this result if carrying the right bacteria?
Yeah, I guess
I
it could
don't know.
change your gut bacteria, like your
Yes, that's
yeah,
what it did. It changed his biome. Is that what it's
right.
called?
Mhm.
Microbiome?
Yeah.
His the little colony living in his gut? So exciting. Okay, I don't want to talk about this anymore though. We did it.
Me either.
We did
Me
it.
either. I didn't
We're
want to talk about it
done.
to begin with.
This has been the news of the butt.
This has been the news of the butt.
Did you hear about the church in Texas that is in a little bit of hot water for staging an unauthorized performance of the musical Hamilton?
I did hear
Yes.
about it.
Yeah, yeah. So a Texas church performed Hamilton this weekend, but the team behind the Tony Award winning production says it should not have happened. It was the Door Church in McAllen, South Texas. Hamilton does not grant amateur or professional licenses for any stage productions and did not grant one to the Door Church. So they were upset already because the church didn't seek a license and didn't get a license and didn't have a license to perform Hamilton. But they became even more upset later when they discovered that not only did the church perform Hamilton without a license, they also rewrote it to make it an evangelistic outreach about Jesus, where Hamilton finds Jesus. Whole bunch of issues there, but it brings a couple of things. First of all, this wasn't a tiny little church that would you just say, oh, we don't know anything about putting on productions. We didn't know you had to have permission to put on production. This, if you see pictures of this, it was a big professional production with great lighting, great sets, great performances. And they've done this before with like Disney musicals where they stage the musical and rewrite it to make it evangelistic outreach.
And did Disney ever sue?
Maybe Disney never knew. I don't know. Suffice it to say, that's against the law. You can't do that. You can't stage a musical without a license, number one. And okay, and churches know. Oops, I almost knocked my ukulele on the floor. Churches know this because they do live performance all the time, and they know they have to have CCLI copyright, permission to, like, even your worship songs that you sing. You got to file and register to sing worship songs if you're doing it the right way. And we used to get like calls and emails at VeggieTales all the time from little churches who said, we want to turn, Madame Blueberry into a musical for our kids to do. And can you give us a license to do that? Because they knew you can't just do that. And if you're a big fancy church that does big fancy productions, you're using people that know how to do production. And they know you can't do that without a license. So here's my question, Sky and Christian. Do you think sometimes we feel like it's okay to bend the rules a little for evangelism?
I don't know, but what I think I may here's the bigger thing. I think just in general, evangelical churches, I'm assuming this is in some category of evangelical church.
Yes.
They just have this complete blind spot, and I'm not sure it's ignorance, but a disregard or a blind spot for intellectual property. Like the amount of plagiarism that goes on in these churches with sermons, the amount of copyrighted material that gets reproduced. I'm an author. I've had this happen to me in a lot of different ways. I'm not surprised. There's just this general disregard for people's intellectual property and an attitude of, well, I can use it for whatever I want because it's out there. And things that would never apply to physical property, they do all and it's just everywhere in the church today, and even
Well,
church leaders.
what about all the Christian T-shirts that take,
Right.
Nike's logo or Starbucks logo or Heinz ketchup logo and then
Right.
twist the verbiage to make it Christian using someone else's logo?
And that's
Also
part of the thing is,
illegal.
again, in evangelical churches, there is this copying of popular culture. They see it all the time, and they think it's fine to just.
And why is it okay, Sky? I'll tell you why it's okay. Because you're taking something that belongs to the devil and you're using it for Jesus.
I think there are a couple of things possibly happening. I mean, one, I am sure there is ignorance. And I say that because I have been guilty, quite frankly. I did two things that I didn't know. I did the Lion King with one group of kids at the school, just, put it together myself, wrote it myself, we performed it. And then I did Sister Act. I did a song from Sister Act with a choir of high school kids. And I had no idea that, and I'm in the industry. And so you would have thought I would have had that thought in my head, but I did not. So I do think there is an element of ignorance, perhaps, but I also think that we have this gut thing that we don't ever check, which is, oh, it's okay, it's for a good cause,
Yep.
or we're Christians and we're not doing, our intention is not to rob anyone of their intellectual property, and we're not charging money. I don't know, were they charging money for Hamilton?
I'm hoping not. If it was an
Yeah.
outreach, probably not.
So I think there's just ignorance really of intellectual property.
Yeah.
And you think, well, if I'm not charging money for that, then I can just do it. So I think it's probably a combination of things. Yeah, that's kind of too bad because it makes us not look very good.
Yeah. I got in trouble because we used to parody a lot of things on VeggieTales, and parody laws, because they could have tried, the South Park guys could pull a little spoof Hamilton performance in a South Park episode, or they sing Frozen songs on Saturday Night Live to spoof Frozen. You can pull some stuff when you're doing parody, but parody laws are pretty strict. And we actually got into trouble when we went from doing a little segment within a video that would parody Star Trek to doing a whole video called The Lord of the Beans, where the whole video was a parody of The Lord of the Rings. And we end up, as we're in production, getting a call from the Salzance Corporation, which owns the film rights to Lord of the Rings, asking us to shut down the production. And so we had to figure out, so what was the difference? Why could I parody Batman and, over here? And the difference was, you're doing an entire product solely about someone else's intellectual property. And so you're actually making money on a representation that is an exploitation of someone else's property. It's not a part of it, it's the whole thing. And that was the difference. So we had to do a deal with Warner Brothers and with the Salzance company to be able to release that video, which involved destroying all of the merchandise we'd designed to go along with it, couldn't sell any of it, and then giving part of the proceeds to Warner Brothers. Yeah, that was fun. Learned a lesson there.
And there's fair use. It's similar to fair use rules, which we had to encounter all the time at Christianity Today. If we wanted, and I face this in my books, if you quote someone else's book, that's fine. You can cite them, you can quote a paragraph here and there. But if you're taking massive amounts of content, then you get into this gray area where it's like, well, is that a fair use excerpt, or is it you're taking a massive amount of their work and just repurposing it and making money off of it? That's not good. And there's no hard and fast rules. Sometimes it's a percentage of the work or something like that. But this happens all the time. But could you imagine if somebody took one of your VeggieTales videos, Phil, or one of my books or your documentary, Christian, and let's say they took 80% of it, and then the other 20% they didn't like, they just changed it to fit a message that conformed more to what they wanted. And it's a complete misrepresentation of what you intended it to be. That's essentially what this church did.
Yeah. Churches, don't do that. Not good. I know it's for a good cause. I know it feels like you're doing it for the right reasons. But shoplifting for the right reasons is still shoplifting, and stealing intellectual property for the right reasons is still. We are a nation of laws. Have you ever heard a conservative Christian say that? We are a nation of laws. We have laws
so ironic?
for a reason. And at some point we should talk about, though this is fun, because we're coming up on the 100th birthday of Mickey Mouse. And the Disney company has successfully lobbied to change copyright law every time they've gotten close to losing Mickey Mouse to public domain. And the question is Congress willing to do it again? Because otherwise, in a year, I think, Mickey Mouse becomes public domain. And anyone can make a Mickey Mouse cartoon and use Mickey Mouse for anything. Obviously not in the company's best interest.
That might depend on whether Disney is still seen as a woke company or neutral.
Depends on who controls Congress, depends on who's in the White House, depends on.
Can't they argue though?
Go ahead. Sorry, Sky.
Can't they argue that Mickey Mouse is a logo, like a trademarked design, not just a character? And therefore, to use this logo, which is iconic and representative of a company, like the Coca-Cola logo never becomes common. What's it called?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, public domain.
Public domain, because it's a company logo. You can't just.
That's a good question. That's
Yeah.
a good question. But the assumption is, I mean, that hasn't happened for other very, very old characters and, and works of literature. Anyone can do a version of The Tale of Two Cities or,
But
anything.
that's all based on the fact that the, author or creator by that time has passed away. And what's interesting now is with things like Disney, it's now no longer a person passing
Right.
away. It's
Yeah,
a
right.
whole company or corporation.
It is a corporate asset. But the same thing happens if you if you come up with a new medication, you've got what, 7 years before you lose the patent on the medication and people can make generics. So, we need generic Mickey Mouses. Come on. I want to use the mouse for evangelism. I'm going to do Mickey Teaches the Bible. I'm waiting. I got it all written. I'm just waiting for Congress to say it's okay. Okay. Other story I want to talk about. Russell Moore wrote a really interesting piece in CT last week, August 11th. And I love the title, one of my favorite titles for a piece I've seen in a long time. When the South Loosens Its Bible Belt. It's a good title. I don't know if he wrote it or someone else came up with the title, but it's a good title. It's about a growing breed of unchurched evangelicals that he says is poised to heighten the culture wars. Okay, so this is the interesting angle in this story. He references a study by Daniel K. Williams, studying a fast-growing trend among white Southern Protestants who seldom or never attend church and yet self-identify as evangelical Christians. And this is what makes it interesting is it's this category of lapsed and non-church attending evangelicals, so grew up evangelical, still calls themselves evangelical, but does not attend church, are now the largest religious body in the South. Okay, so there's more non-church attending evangelicals in the South than any other group of religious people in the South. And when you look at these people, he says these unchurched evangelicals are not secularizing in the same way as, say, people in Denmark or Germany, or even as folks in Connecticut or Oregon. Unchurched evangelicals in the South not only keep their politics, but also ratchet up to more extreme levels. They maintain the same moral opinions, except on matters that directly affect them, like premarital sex, smoking pot, or getting drunk. So they drop the things from their evangelicalism that get in the way of how they want to live their lives, but they hang on to the rest of the politics from evangelicalism, and not only just hang on to it, they kick it up a notch. They are also, compared to church-attending evangelicals, lonelier, more disconnected, angrier, and more suspicious of institutions. So what he's looking at is we have to recognize this group of people as a specific group of people. He says the kind of cultural Christianity we now see in this group often keeps everything about the religious right except the religion. Cultural Christianity, as we once knew it, is largely being replaced by a kind of blood and soil Christianity. The Christianity in such settings is the sense of belonging and obligation not to a church, but to a particular brand of white political and cultural identity. Okay, so what he's saying is we have a new group of evangelicals that we're not talking enough about because they don't go to church. So they're never under the teaching of a pastor, and they're not in Christian community except on social media. And when you move from a church-going evangelical into a non-church-going evangelical, particularly in the South, rather than becoming more secular, because he says many people on the left think once they stop attending church, they're just going to listen to NPR and sit around at dinner parties, discussing Terry Gross. He says, no, they're actually getting more radical toward the right as they lose Christian community. So he's concerned that, rather than churches being a radicalizing influence, which is how many, people on the progressive left portray like small churches in middle America, churches are actually for the most part, with a few exceptions, the moderating influence that is no longer in many lives. And social media is the radicalizing influence that is discipling people that no longer want to be a part of a Christian community, but still say Christian identity is very important to them. Sky, you're dying to say something.
Well, I thought it was a fascinating piece as well, and we've been seeing this develop over the last number of years. I remember when Trump first came on the scene in 2015 during the Republican primaries, and there were a lot of other people in the race. They found that the Republican voters who did not attend church regularly were far more likely to support Donald Trump. And it wasn't until much later, after Trump had more or less secured the nomination, that you saw church-going evangelicals begin to fall in line behind him. But there's always been this attraction for people who are not particularly rooted in their actual Christian faith or doctrine or community that have found this guy attractive. The problem is that group is growing. So there's two things here. One is you have the fact that so many people are leaving the church. They're entering the ranks of the MAGA evangelicals, for lack of a better term. So you both have the radicalizing that's happening through social media and cable news and other sources, but then you also have the fact that churches are losing their congregants. So you have to stop the flood of people out of the church, and you also have to stop radicalizing them once they leave. But there's two parts to that problem that have to be looked at.
Absolutely. Christian, what did you have time to read the article?
I did. I really thought that, it was very insightful. He made a lot of excellent points. It did remind me of something that my friend Sarah Murdoch sent me this week. And really truthfully, if I hadn't read it with my own eyes, I would not think that it was real. But she was in a store and an advertisement or something for Liz Cheney came on, and a man that I think is in their church or is a Christian said something very negative about Liz Cheney. And my friend Sarah said, "Way to go, Liz." And they got into a conversation. She said, "I support what she's doing." And anyway, he just stormed off. But then he wrote a letter to the editor of their little paper in Pinedale, Wyoming. And he said, while I'm, basically he's ranting and raving about all the liberals who support all these woke things. And he says, while I'm at it, I'm going to take on the Christians, in air quotes, who support Liz Cheney and her agenda to rid the country of 45. Why in God's great name are you supporting someone who is so hate-filled, who is trying to take out a man who put 3 justices on the bench, who helped overturn Roe v. Wade, and who moved our consulate to Jerusalem, which 6 presidents promised to do, who is getting us peacefully out of Afghanistan, and who did by far, in bold, caps, more for the poor Black communities of our nation in 4 years than a Black president did in his 8 years. If you support her, I'm not even going to mention what awaits you. And I just am appalled. I just think, how can Christians even say those things? To me, it boggles my mind whether they're, going to church regularly or not and just say they're evangelicals. I just don't understand that mindset. And I don't think that there's anything that we can do. Like when I read this thing by, Russell Moore, I thought, we're still talking about this 6 years later. You were talking last week about, we can't reelect this president anymore. But the fact of the matter is, what really can we practically do other than continue to, voice our objections and plead for people to, I don't know. What are we going to do?
Yeah, and I don't think Moore is writing this piece with Trump in mind necessarily. He's writing about a new demographic, that becomes more radical as it becomes more separate from the church. So
but what are we to do about that? I get that, and that's just pointing that out.
Yeah,
right. And that's what we keep doing, is pointing it out. But
he says, okay, some secular progressives, when they look at conspiracy theories or political polarization or political violence, they blame the local churches. They assume that the problem lies in pastors whipping their people into a frenzy with dangerous ideas. And then Moore says, yet apart from a handful of well-publicized churches led by such personalities, this is rarely the case. At least in my own experience, churches are usually the sanest outpost of what now goes by American Christianity. If we really pay attention to what is going on with the loneliness, disconnection, and fanaticism disguised as conviction, we can see that the local church is, in many ways, not the problem, but the solution. And I agree with him that I don't know that we can take existing churches the way they are and suddenly, I don't know, radically change them to attract these people back in, but people still want to belong to something. So the question is, what other forms can following Jesus take? I think we have to get more aggressive. Kristen Kobes Dumais wrote a piece this week. Maybe we'll post that in the show notes as well, about the rise of violence and the potential for political violence, and how we absolutely have to call it out if we see it, amongst our own friends, amongst our own families, if we bump into it on social media or in our church communities, when people are saying things like, we got to go after the FBI because they went after Trump, or we got to go after, when we dehumanize people, we're taking the first step down the path of approving of violence against them. And we need to help people see that that isn't the way of Jesus.
And I think that piece, Phil, the Kristen Kobes Dumais piece, is the missing part from Russell Moore's piece. I loved what Russell said. I agree with a lot of what he said. I do believe churches are mitigating forces in these things rather than the contributing to all the terribleness. But here's the problem. I agree with him. Most pastors are not whipping their churches up into a frenzy, into a MAGA Christian nationalist, blood and soil kind of frenzy. That's not happening in most evangelical churches. But most pastors in evangelical churches aren't saying anything about this stuff at all. And so the problem with that is the people who do leave and get sucked into the blood and soil MAGA Christian nationalism, they think they're still following Jesus. And that's the problem. We need church leaders and Christian leaders to speak out honestly, boldly, and prophetically, saying this way of so-called practicing your faith is not following Jesus. You cannot call for the murder of your neighbors. You cannot endorse lies and conspiracy theories and untruths. That is not following Jesus. And until pastors say that, these people who are radical and are threatening civil war and stuff like that are going to continue to believe that they are actually Christians and following the way of God. And that gives them license and fuel for their self-righteous rage. So I agree with Russell. The churches are not causing the problem, but they're not doing enough to stop it yet either.
Okay. I hear you.
Yeah, that was my point about that guy. I mean, truthfully, he honestly believes he is following Jesus.
Right.
And that the other Christians that are for Liz Cheney and everything else woke are not. And that is just a lack of, discipleship.
What's interesting about the letter to the editor that he wrote is it pulls together talking points, that he would have picked up on social media or right-wing news outlets. And there isn't enough pushback on those talking points, because when I get into conversations about race online, I'll get hit quite often with that same argument that Trump did more for black people than Obama. And when you dive into that claim, it's pretty easy to show that it's not accurate. But if you don't have the conversation to dive into a claim like that, then it's hard. They'll just keep carrying it around, and you're trying to build a little fortress of impenetrability against your assumptions, to keep them inside this little fortress, and no one can touch my assumptions. And you have to have some relationship with someone to be able even to get access even before they open a window, so that you can just give a tiny little, here's a counterpoint, here's a counter narrative, here's just another way to look at that. And if we can just do that, but we have to be friends with people, we can't, if we dehumanize them ourselves, forget it. So we cannot demonize those who demonize, or dehumanize those who
But I think there's a
dehumanize.
difference between dehumanizing and pointing out that somebody who's claiming the mantle of Jesus Christ and his authority for their belief system, pointing out that that is not Christian. That's not dehumanizing somebody. It's just saying,
No,
please
it's
don't
not.
call yourself a Christian when you're doing things that are completely antithetical to the call and way of Jesus. I believe everybody in my community who are not Christians are still human and deserve human dignity and to be loved as a neighbor. That doesn't mean that you can call yourself a Christian and do things that are completely contrary to the way of Christ. And those of us in church leadership should be calling out those things.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do think it is more important. Someone asked us on the episode we did where people send in questions, how do you find a community of people? How do you find a church that wants to do church like this? Like what we're advocating for. And we are having that conversation internally. Like how do you just, because we have a pretty big audience and other like-minded people have pretty big audiences. So is there a way to allow people to meet each other, that are trying to do faith this way? And yeah, we're talking about that because there has to be a larger movement just then. I listened to a podcast once that was good about that. We need more.
Right.
Well, and let me just say, and I know I always bring it back to stuff like this, but prayer changes people. Prayer, relationships, and love. And that really, love should be our aim. We should be serving when we go out of our way to do loving acts for those that disagree with us. It takes all the, bluster out of the conversation, I think. And so I think, that's the practical stuff we need to focus on: praying for our friends and our enemies, loving them, going beyond and outside of ourselves to get to know people that we don't know who believe differently than we believe, and listening to them and not othering them, like you say, Phil. We have to be careful on our side of it not to do that.
So the assignment for this week, go hug a MAGA evangelical. You know one. You know one. Give them a hug. Have coffee. Don't talk about politics the first time you get together. Leave that entirely out of it. Talk about their kids. Talk about their job. Talk about the economy, how they're being affected by the economy. Because you can quite often figure out what's motivating people to move in the directions they're moving in by seeing what pain they've experienced in the last few years of their life.
Good advice.
Thanks, Christian. Okay. Sky, do we have a guest?
We do. Good one.
I knew we would. That's so exciting. It's Katelyn Beaty, right?
Yes, her new book,
Katelyn Beaty,
Celebrities for Jesus, just
fantastic.
released.
Okay, Christian, are you going to be back in 2 weeks, or are you going to go off to a new beach somewhere and fall off the map?
I will be home.
Okay.
The only other place I got to go is take my kid to college. But
okay.
Other than that, I'll be home.
Okay, cool. Thanks for being back. It's good to see you.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to be here.
All of you, thanks for listening. Thanks for the support on Patreon. You guys are awesome. As always, we'll keep doing it. You keep supporting it, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
This episode is being brought to you by With God Daily, my daily devotional for people who hate daily devotionals. Most devotionals are sentimental and uncritical. They might make you smile, but they rarely make you think. With God Daily is different. It's written to engage your heart as well as your mind, and it does that by using theology, history, culture, and even science to illuminate your life with God. Each devotional also includes scripture readings and an historic prayer of the church. Right now in With God Daily, we're doing a series about the cross. We're examining different theories about Jesus' death, and even looking at some of the more controversial issues out there right now, like, does the doctrine of substitutionary atonement make God into some kind of cosmic child abuser? Was animal sacrifice in the Old Testament immoral? And why do Catholics and Protestants think of the cross so differently? If those are the kinds of issues you want to engage every day with accessible writing and an occasional doodle, then you should sign up for With God Daily. To join, just visit withgoddaily.com. You'll get an email devotional 5 days a week, plus the audio devotional, and you can download the mobile app for a better user experience and access to the archives. With God Daily is available to anyone who makes a donation of any amount. So go to withgoddaily.com and discover the daily devotional for people who hate daily devotionals. My conversation today is with my friend Katelyn Beaty. We used to be colleagues together at Christianity Today, and years ago you might remember that she used to be a regular on this show. However, she moved to New York where she kind of became big time. She's written now for the New York Times, the New Yorker, the Washington Post, Religion News Service, Religion and Politics, and even the Atlantic. She's commented on CNN, ABC, NPR, and all kinds of other outlets. All that to say, she's done some incredible work in recent years and started a podcast of her own called Saved by the City. Her new book is called Celebrities for Jesus: How Personas, Platforms, and Profits Are Hurting the Church. Obviously, this is a topic we've covered from time to time on the Holy Post, but nobody does it better than Katelyn Beaty. She's researched the history of celebrity in the American church, looked at the psychological aspects of it, how we can do a better job of preventing the implosions that we see all the time in the American church, and how the publishing industry has contributed to this problem. And that's a topic that we go deeper into in an exclusive interview just for our Patreon supporters. If you've not yet signed up to become a Patreon supporter of the Holy Post, today's the day to do it. You do not want to miss that bonus segment with Katelyn Beaty. And of course, you also get access to all kinds of other bonus materials, exclusive merchandise, and our monthly live stream. Go to holypost.com and click the Support Us button to find out more. Okay, here is my regular conversation available to everyone with Katelyn Beaty. Katelyn Beaty, welcome back to the Holy Post.
It's been a really long time.
It's been way too long.
You and Phil seem to have done well without me, I'll just say.
And likewise, you've done very well without us, which I don't know how that happens in the Christian world. How does anyone succeed without the Holy Post?
That is why I'm here, actually, to succeed.
We launched you?
Yes.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it wasn't Christianity Today or all the articles you wrote for the New Yorker or your books. It was the Holy Post.
It was just the Veggie Tales guy specifically.
Right.
It was like the connection to Larry and Bob.
Well, we're glad that you've been so successful. You have a new book out called Celebrities for Jesus, which is not a manual, despite what some people might think. This is not how to build your platform and become a celebrity for Jesus. It's a critique. The subtitle, How Personas, Platforms, and Profits Are Hurting the Church. This is a topic you and I have talked about on the air, off the air, when we were together at CT. It's kind of been background noise for both of us throughout our careers.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you decide this is your next book, knowing that there's probably 10 other things you could have written just as compellingly about? Why this one?
Mm-hmm. I think I just got tired of seeing and hearing really bad news about Christian leaders. You know, like working at a Christian magazine for a decade where we consistently had to report really discouraging news about some of the leading lights of evangelicalism. I not only started to feel a little bit cynical, which is kind of natural when you're when you're in a journalistic world, but also we have to get this right. Like, this isn't just a matter of not wanting bad news. It's a matter of Christian credibility in a watching world. And every time there's another story about Hillsong, megachurch pastor, plagiarism, I mean, all sorts of, abuse of power, it isn't just a matter of having a healthy church. It's having a credible church, because our neighbors are seeing those stories and reading about them. And what does it say about the faith that we profess? Not only that this keeps on happening, these various abuses, but also that it seems like a lot of people and leaders are in it for the wrong reasons. And our neighbors can see that. Like, no one is going to preachers in sneakers, which we could get to. Like, the reason that is blown up is that everybody can see that there is something so fundamentally weird and almost certainly wrong to have a pastor of the gospel, a preacher of the gospel, wearing a $50,000 watch.
So one of the criticisms I've gotten, Christianity Today has gotten over the years is, why are you guys so quick to critique people in your own camp? You're only making it worse. I have been in the office of a well-known megachurch leader being yelled at, and him saying, how come I can get good press from the Wall Street Journal and I can't get good press from Christianity Today? Right? So how do you respond to that you're only doing the devil's work by talking about all the dirt going on and the unsavory things happening in Christian ministries?
Well, I just have to go back to the scene that you have set of being yelled at in a mega church pastor's office. And I hope I never see the day that I have to like face Pastor Don in his like, mansion-esque office. You can't deal with the dirt. You can't clean it out unless you acknowledge that it's there. I think that Christians in particular can have a spiritualized understanding of the work of the church, over spiritualized understanding of the work of the church and of their leaders, where because people are in prominent positions of leadership, they're above reproach, they're above accountability. And if you're going to deal with it, you should kind of deal with it behind closed doors. But the fact is that they are public leaders. And as a journalist, I think, well, then we have to deal with it publicly, especially when, as this often happens, the people in the leader's inner circle are playing the game alongside. Like they're not going to say anything because they receive indirect light from this person being in the spotlight. Like they benefit by proxy from being connected to the celebrity leader.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a little bit. Well, we've had a couple of different guests on to talk about either specific scandals that have emerged or the toxicity of the church in general. There's been a number of books on this topic. Scott McKnight wrote a really interesting book called The Church Called Tove that outlines the toxicity versus Tove or goodness of the church. But what's interesting about your book, what I think sets it apart, is you certainly get into some of the scandals and catastrophes that have happened and the abuses that created those scandals, but you're critiquing celebrity itself. Whereas some other people will say, yeah, we have these Christian celebrities and it's really bad when some of them fall. But you're saying even if they don't fall, there's a problem with this celebrity culture, even when it seems to be working well. So let's start here. Early in the book, you talk about the difference between fame and celebrity. Explain the difference.
Yeah. So I would say, fame, being known by people who you don't know in any personal way, but your good works, your leadership, your desire to serve, whatever it is, like leading a sacrificial life, like you've become known for something. I think fame is oftentimes and kind of at its healthiest when it is the result of something good that you have done in the world, that you have contributed to the world. You're not in it for your own glory. Like fame is kind of this byproduct that comes to you unbidden. And then you have to decide, okay, now that I have fame, how do I steward it well or wisely or like Christ, if you're a Christian? Celebrity is something that has been cultivated, in the last 150 years using the tools of mass media to amplify one's image, one's voice, to project an appearance of well-knownness and import, but without having to actually have done anything. And I will say all of us, any of us who kind of swim in the waters of social media are swimming in celebrity waters because, I use the tools of mass media on a daily basis to project. I mean, I hope I project ideas and like an occasional joke, but I'm certainly projecting an image of myself as well. But I think it's the curation of an image and really kind of falsely amplifying one's importance for the financial and for the financial gains and access to power that it could bring you. And then that, of course, is informing like how people try to get book deals or try to ascend to, a top spot in their church or ascend to a position of leadership. They're using these tools to kind of puff up their own importance, but without having had to have proven that they're actually people of integrity or want to serve in the way that Christ does.
One of the things I appreciate is you have a chapter relatively early in the book about sort of the history of this in American Christianity. And you talk a lot about Billy Graham, but even the influences that came before Graham that created who he
Mhm.
was. Things like mass media, the use of radio and television, um, the emphasis within evangelicalism on entrepreneurial individualism rather than
Yes.
focus on institutions, using business strategies and structures. All that's been there for a long, long time, which kind of created the environment we're in now. And you have this definition of celebrity that you use throughout the book, which is super helpful. You define it as social power without proximity.
Mhm.
And the fact that that's not new, that's been there. I mean, you could argue some of the New Testament was social power without proximity, right? Writing an epistle
Mm.
and sending it to the other side of the Roman Empire was a
Mhm.
way an apostle had social power without being in close proximity to a group of people. So why is it wrong now if
Mm.
it's always been there? The church has always used social power
Mhm.
at a distance to try to
Mhm.
do kingdom work, gospel work. Why is it a problem
Mhm.
now the way we do it?
So that's a really good example of Paul using the tools of media of his time, some unknown scribe, to send out his messages to the church. And also, Paul was intimately, physically, in an embodied way, connected to the earliest Christian communities. And he writes multiple times in his letters, like, I long to be with you in person. I long to be present with you, because we know and we recognize the way that God has designed humans is that we are best when we are intimately, deeply connected with other people in the flesh, that there are things that can happen relationally, spiritually, in person that cannot happen over the transom. And so it's not so much if you use the tools of mass media, we know that you're seeking celebrity. I think I'm grateful for the tools of mass media. And certainly someone like Billy Graham would say, if I have the opportunity to preach the gospel to millions and millions of people the world over, why wouldn't I use these tools that are available to me? It's when the connection to people from afar becomes more central and more important to your sense of calling than the connections that you have to the people who know you when you're off the stage and not in the spotlight, and like they know that you're annoying sometimes, and they know about your sins, and they know about your pet peeves, and they know and they also love you in spite of all those things. Like, all of us need that. And for anybody whose star is rising, they are great communicators, great preachers. They maybe go into ministry with really good intentions. But if your star is rising, I would say, oh, be careful. Like, be sure that you have those deep rooted connections in person to remind you you are a person. You are one person. You are not the image that is projected on a screen or on a podcast. Like, Sky.
Is this an
Um,
intervention? Is that what this is?
it is if you want it to be, like if it is to you, then yes. Yeah, so it's, and I think even Billy Graham would say at the end of his life, and certainly his family could reflect on this too, like, I probably should have been home more. Like, I probably
Yeah.
should have been at home in person, not working, not on a stage in front of millions more than I was. And that's not without a cost.
Okay, so you spend a lot of time in the book unpacking some of the well-known celebrity leader, Christian leader implosions that we've seen over the last couple of years. Bill Hybels, Ravi Zacharias, Mars Hill, Mark Driscoll, all that kind of stuff. Many of our listeners are familiar with. And in most of those stories, these big celebrity leaders had, at least in some form, they had an accountability structure. They had elders, or they
Mm-hmm.
had board members, or they had people,
Mm-hmm.
relationships that give the appearance that there should have been accountability, somebody who knew them, who could challenge them, who could ground them, but it failed anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So as you researched those stories and looked at this whole dynamic of celebrity, why is it not enough to have those structures in
Mm-hmm.
place? Why did that, even when they put them in place, it very often doesn't work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really important question. I think it really comes down to the dynamics of power between the person that is being held accountable or says that they want to be held accountable and the people who are asked to hold them accountable. This is not uniformly true, but I think in the three instances you just mentioned, the people asked to hold the top leader accountable were either enamored with the person in like a spiritual mentor sense, like, I want to be like you brought me to faith, I hope to work with you in ministry leadership, in the coming years, I could get a book deal because I work with you. I could
Right.
benefit in some way from having your name or the name of this organization tied to a book proposal. There is the dynamic of fear, which is, of course, like in the case of Mark Driscoll, you had someone who wasn't afraid to be a bully, and people saying, I know I'm supposed to speak up to him and stand up to him. And yet the last 5 guys who did, and I do mean guys, they all got fired, or they were, their reputations were tarnished, or they were like kicked out of ministry or lost power in some ways. I don't want to be like that guy. And then it's also, Nancy Beach was reflecting on this, a leadership expert who was in a leadership position at Willow Creek for several years and worked closely with Bill Hybels. She just talked about the kind of spiritual father figure dynamic that can happen as well, where so many people asked to hold someone to account really believe that that person, that leader, is like specially anointed by God, or is, what comes out of their mouth is essentially what God wants for the church. And so who are they to kind of stand up to somebody who we all know has been chosen, selected, handpicked by the Lord to carry out really important, significant kingdom work? We don't want to get in the way of that. Who's
Yeah,
gonna try to stop that train?
Can I quote something from your book? This is on page 59. I think I may have the advanced copy, so maybe it's not the same page number in the final copy. But anyway, the 2019 Willow Creek Governance Review, which kind of did a postmortem on what happened in this whole conflict, included this: the senior pastor was larger than life for many. Most board members gave deference to him. This made it difficult for some elders to challenge him in a meeting. They felt like they were sitting in a board meeting with a celebrity. That's the quote from their own assessment of what went wrong at Willow Creek. The report notes a culture of fear, controlling behavior, and board capitulation as reasons why Hybels couldn't be stopped. So if it's possible there, it's possible anywhere. I mean, this is not just unique to mega churches. There's even small churches where these dynamics can occur. Okay. Along these lines of...
But I have a question for you.
Oh, okay.
What do you think that is why? Like, do you think that essentially we talk a really good game about accountability in a lot of Christian spaces, but then when you get down to the nitty gritty of it and how it actually plays out, it's like, this person can do whatever they want, and their claiming of being held accountable is just like a cover for them. Like, it's a way to kind of sign off on stuff. Like, well, my elder board said it was okay, or like,
yeah,
it's just it's a cover to essentially just go on and do whatever they were going to do in the first place.
I do agree with that. And even in denominational structures, obviously Willow Creek and Mars Hill and some of these others are independent churches, so they didn't have that oversight. And some people think, well, the solution then is a denomination where there's some oversight, where there's a bishop or a superintendent or somebody above who can come in, and I'm for that. I think it's helpful. But even that, I have seen where in a lot of popular evangelicalism, powerful gifting covers a multitude of sins. And even if you have accountability in the structure, if you are a very gifted, effective, so, using air quotes, effective minister who gets a lot of attention, brings in a lot of people, generates a lot of revenue, brings in a lot of positive publicity for the church, the denomination, the ministry, whatever it is, even the authority structures above you, even when they know something's going wrong, will be very reluctant to put their foot down and say enough's enough because you're the golden goose.
Right.
And so there's a lot of reasons why that happens, but I think we just get so enamored with gifting that we don't look
Mm-hmm.
at real maturity.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the other end of it. So on one side, you have these leaders who are very gifted, very effective, and the people who know them won't hold them accountable, perhaps for that reason. But then there's the others. There's the rest of us. There's the riffraff who are sitting in the seats or watching online at this
Mm-hmm.
person. And you talk about how celebrity creates the illusion of intimacy.
Mm.
And I think this is an appropriate time to bring up John Mulaney and and your confession in the book about your illusion of intimacy with John Mulaney, the stand-up comic.
Okay. This is not where I thought we were going, but I am happy to go here because it is actually in the book. So
Yeah.
you're not like revealing anything that I don't reveal about
You
myself.
use it as an illustration. It's an illustration.
Yeah. So
Explain what you mean.
John Mulaney is a fantastic stand-up comedian. We're about the same age. He has had multiple Netflix specials. I recommend them. Probably PG-13. Just, I don't know if I want to watch them with my parents, but like some real comedic gold.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also had a lot going on in his personal life in the last couple of years. He is a celebrity, like, the tabloids and blogs like write about him and have written a lot about him as his personal life has gone through a series of dramatic changes in the last couple of years. And the way that people, and perhaps especially young women who are fans of John Mulaney, the way that we have reacted to this news about him, especially in his like romantic life, is so weird and dramatic, and like it is happening to us in a personal way, even though this is happening to someone we've literally never met, never had a conversation with. He doesn't know who Katelyn Beaty is and does not care to know. So how is it that I and so many others can develop such strong attachments? It's not just the level of like, I really appreciate his work. It is some kind of relational or emotional attachment. And it doesn't have to be romantic. I mean, I think all of us, when we think about the dynamics of fandom and what being a fan brings out in us, it's touching on, I think, in part, like a desire for intimacy, to be connected to someone who is larger than life, who we want to connect with in some deep way. And of course, that fandom can happen like in strange ways in the church, when people come to a church only to hear one particular person preach. Like that person is the only reason that they preach. They might skip Sundays where that person isn't preaching and just like hang on this person's every word. What is going on there? And then really want a chance to connect with that person. Like, at Willow Creek, there was the bullpen where Bill Hybels would like come down from the stage after preaching and like meet with people one-on-one, and people would stand in line to like get a chance to meet Bill Hybels. Like,
so, I mean, that brings up, I think we can all understand what is in it for the celebrity, right? They get power, they get fame, they get sometimes a lot of money, they get their ego stroked, they get applause, they get all that good stuff. What's in it for the fan? Like, why do we do this? And especially within the church, what do we get out of making these people into celebrities? There's got to be some benefit, otherwise we wouldn't keep doing it all the time.
I think some of it, at least in the church, comes down to what we believe about Christian greatness and what the Christian life should look like and be like. And, the vast majority of us do not have the skills or the opportunity to preach the gospel in front of millions of people, or preach from a stage at all, or, host a popular podcast or whatever. But we almost feel that we get some of that glow and that importance by proxy. Like, attaching to these heroes. So many people flocked to Ravi Zacharias, even when problems started to emerge long before the allegations of sexual abuse, issues with plagiarism and kind of fake doctorates, essentially. But it didn't matter. Like, people attached to him because they loved the idea that someone like him could not only be presenting the gospel around the world, but like going toe to toe with those bad atheists. Like, so I think, and I get into this later in the book, there's also a culture war dynamic in some of this, where we prop up people who we perceive will kind of defend or give a cool gloss to this faith that we fear is being attacked or undermined. Like, when we feel weak in that, or persecuted, or whatever language we want to use, like, we prop up these other people who seem to be willing to represent Christianity well in the public square.
Yeah, you mentioned the conversion of Kanye West or Justin Bieber or some of these other big celebrities, and there's a sense of, see, we Christians are cool too because we have these guys on our team. And how much better would it be if the Kardashians came along and joined our team? I wonder if part of it is a dynamic that's very, very ancient, in that we really do look at these leaders as priests. And strictly speaking, a priest is a bridge. It's someone who, at least in the ancient world, could put their hand on humanity and on divinity and serve as a bridge between the two, a mediator between human and divine. And now it's like there's so many Christian leaders who will post on social media when they've met with the president or they've gone to the White House, right? Whoever the president might be at the time, doesn't matter. And there's a sense of, see, if you attach yourself to me and I'm close to President Trump or Obama or Biden, whoever's in the office, then sort of by proxy, you're close to them too, because you've put your identity in me and I'm with them. There's a sense of glow. This, I have power, I have influence too, through my mediating priest. And so you pick your priest, you pick your celebrity that you're going to attach yourself to, and it makes you feel one step removed. It's sort of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon almost, with Christian celebrity stuff going on. I wonder if that's part of it. And I don't know what the answer to that necessarily is, other than everyone needs to grow up and put on their big boy pants and realize that, frankly, as a Christian, you have direct access to God. Why? Through Christ. Why are you so impressed that your pastor knows Justin Bieber? Like, that's a big step down.
But if you got a pitch from Justin Bieber's PR person saying Justin Bieber really wants to come on the Holy Post podcast, you would be ecstatic.
I would probably say yes, assuming there weren't bounds put on what we could talk to him about. We have had, not Justin Bieber, level celebrity, but we have had some people pitch to us that we haven't had on the show, partly because we've learned from some other experiences that doesn't often go well. But yeah, I mean, there is that's more of a transactional thing where it's like, ooh, if we got Justin Bieber on the show, like that could really explode our audience. And there's a transactional thing, but that's my point, isn't it? That if my pastor goes to the White House or my pastor knows this person, there's a transaction implied there that it's increasing my status because I go to that guy's church, or so that's what I'm trying to get at. And I'm trying to figure out the source. Why do we as ordinary Christians do that so often? And what is it we're getting wrong that we keep looking to these pastors to be this mediating power for us?
Yeah, I think the priestly image has a lot of explanatory power. I also think about discipleship in the local church, and are ordinary Christians is really disappointed that church is with a bunch of like flawed, ordinary people just like them. And like their small group is a little bit boring. And the pastor I don't know, has bad coffee breath or something. Like all the ways in which
The worst the
ordinary
pastor can do. Bad coffee breath.
all the ways in which like ordinary people can be disappointing, and then you realize like, oh, the Christian life is, I guess, is it just about worshiping with these people week in and week out and growing in Christ likeness? And isn't it more fun to listen to Tim Keller preach or Beth Moore speak? Like outsourcing discipleship
Yeah.
to really gifted, accomplished
Right.
speakers and teachers, because kind of ordinary discipleship in the local church feels like it's lacking
Yeah.
in
I think that's
comparison.
exactly right. I think it's exactly right. First of all, normal discipleship doesn't happen on a platform. It
Mhm.
happens at a coffee table or in a kitchen or in someone's apartment as you're having a conversation, or on a park bench, whatever. It doesn't usually happen from a pulpit on a platform. But the moment you make the model that church is about the platform and the pulpit, the next easy step is, well, who's the best in that platform? Who's
Mhm.
the best performance artist in that spot? And I'd rather
Mhm.
have a Tim Keller than my coffee tooth stained pastor who's really godly but not a great personality on a platform, right? And by the way, it would
Mhm.
not be Justin
Mhm.
Bieber that I would like fawn over. It's Stephen Colbert. He's my white whale. He's
Yeah.
who I want on this show
Yes.
more than anyone else. So I have my problems as well, I guess.
Oh,
But I don't think
yes.
I'd look to him
Well,
as a priest, but go ahead.
I went to see Stephen Colbert. I went to see The Tonight Show taped live last year. It was
Mm-hmm.
like in the middle of the day. You stand in line forever. Like it's a whole rigmarole. The And I did not meet him, but they just put me in the second row. Like I had no control of it. They were like, we have this extra spot. We're going to put you here. And I was like 10 feet away from Stephen Colbert. And the emotional effect of that
Mm-hmm.
for someone who is really, I think, lived out what it means to be a Christian in the public square in a very compelling way
Right.
that seems to have integrity and authenticity. And he's brilliant and hilarious and loves his wife. Like I felt that attachment. Maybe that's how people is that how people felt when like Paul the apostle like finally got to their city? Like maybe some of the early Christian leaders had a kind of glow about them because of the great things they had done.
Well, okay, we got to wrap up here in a second, and maybe you'll stick around for a few more minutes for a bonus thing that I want to talk to you about. But like Jesus was a celebrity. He was famous in his
Mhm.
ministry. And
Yes.
the crowds were following him, and they wanted to get closer and see the miracles and all that stuff. But there came a point where he, like John 6 is a good example of this, but there comes different points in his ministry where he basically turns to the people and goes, "Are you sure you know what you're doing by following me?
Mm.
Because you understand where I'm heading, and can
Mhm.
you really drink the cup that I'm going to drink? Can you really follow the path I'm going on? Because it's not glorious and as the world would define it, and it's not going to be what you think." And so sometimes I wonder, like, if Stephen Colbert had some kind of massive moral failing, I'm guessing it would not devastate your faith. Like you're not looking at, you'd
No.
be disappointed. We'd probably all be disappointed, but you wouldn't go, "Oh, this is devastating to who I am as a follower of Jesus because I had pinned all
Right.
of my hopes on him." Right. Um,
Mhm.
so, but on the flip side, I feel like those who are celebrities and Christians, um, the implicit promise they're making is, hey, if you follow Jesus the way I do, you'll be famous, you'll be wealthy, you'll be well admired and
Mhm.
all that. And
Mhm.
and Jesus basically said, if you follow me the way I'm following the Father, the world's not going to like you. It's not going to be what you think. And am I still valuable enough apart from those things? And that's the message we don't usually get
Mhm.
in the celebrity
Mhm.
Christian culture nowadays. Um,
Mhm.
so
There's like a
before
promise of there's like a promise of glory
exactly,
that these
it's
celebrity
all
Christians, and
it's
instead Jesus is like, no, it's the cross. Like that, it's not glory. It's the cross.
well, it's glory, but only after the cross, right? It's they want to
Right,
bypass
right.
Good Friday and just get to
Mhm.
Easter Sunday. All right, Caitlin, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Will you stick around for a couple minutes for a bonus segment to talk about Christian publishing, which is an interesting chapter of this book?
I must and I shall.
You must and you shall. Okay, you owe everything you have to the Holy Post, so you are obligated to us. But
Yes.
seriously, thank you so much for this book, Celebrities for Jesus: How Personas, Platforms, and Profits Are Hurting the Church. Really well researched, well written, compelling, and gets beyond just the surface stuff to dig deeper into this phenomenon and what we can do about it. So everyone, go check this out. It's a great book. Katelyn, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
The Holy Post Podcast is a production of Holy Post Media. Production assistance by Julie Betcher. Editing by Jason Rugg. Help us create more thoughtful Christian media by supporting us at patreon.com/Holy Post. Also, be sure to leave a review on iTunes so more people can discover thoughtful Christian commentary, plus ukulele, and occasional butt news. Visit holypost.com for show notes, news stories, Holy Post merchandise, and much more.